Greetings to all. This is Tendai Dumbuchena, host of the podcast Africa in Crisis. Welcome to episode 6, which implores African leaders across the continent to prioritize and focus on the goose that lays the golden egg, the economy. When this podcast was launched over a month ago, it identified the underwhelming economic performance of African countries as the root cause of the continent's position as the least developed and poorest in the world. This will not change until there is political leadership in all regions of the continent committed to focus in word and deed on economic growth and modernization. It will require leadership that combines competence with integrity. It will require zero tolerance for corruption currently rampant on the continent. It will require a leadership willing to work with all key stakeholders to set Africa on a sustained upward economic trajectory. African countries in the main export minerals and other natural resources as well as low-value agricultural and horticultural products. They in turn import high-value manufactured goods and machinery from developed economies. In Africa, the majority of countries without oil reserves also have to import their fuel requirements. The trade with the developed world is unequal in monetary value. The continent cannot economically take a great leap forward if it remains an exporter of raw materials and low-value products. In sub-Saharan Africa, the 5 top countries in terms of their gross domestic products are Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Ghana. Of these, only South Africa has a significant industrial manufacturing base. But sadly, South Africa is sliding backwards with a steady erosion of its manufacturing base. For decades, there's been endless talk of beneficiation and industrialization with very little to show for it. A game changer is desperately needed. So how does Africa move away from being an exporter of raw materials and low-value products? This road has been traversed before by countries that were similarly trapped in poverty and underdevelopment. South Korea is an excellent example. The Asian country moved from being on the list of least developed nations in the 1950s and early 60s to its current status as a developed, highly industrialized country. It is now the 10th largest economy in the world with an economic output of $1.8 trillion. South Korea was in the 1950s and 60s at roughly the same level of economic development as newly independent African nations such as Ghana and Nigeria. The majority of its citizens were subsistence farmers. South Korea is not blessed with vast mineral wealth like many African countries are. Furthermore, only 22% of the country has arable land, with the rest being mountains and hills. So South Korea focused on its most important resource, its people. It invested in education, research and development, and innovation to produce a highly skilled and productive workforce. The state was the driving force in formulating 5-year development plans, setting targets and priorities. It also provided incentives for the growth of the private sector. Family conglomerates such as Samsung, LG, and Hyundai were founded with the assistance of the state. Heavy industries like shipbuilding, steel mills, and vehicle manufacture anchored the economy before a strategic shift to the high-tech sector in the 1990s. Today, South Korea is a huge exporter of high-end electronic goods, vehicles, ships, and smartphones. It recently announced a commitment to invest $451 billion in the manufacture of semiconductors. It wants to be a big player in this sector, currently dominated by China and Taiwan, by the year 2030. South Korea has similar ambitions in the defense industry. There is little doubt that within the next 2 or 3 decades, South Korea will, alongside Japan, China, Germany, and the United States of America, be a huge economic power. South Korea was also a colony. From 1910 to 1945, the Korean Peninsula was a Japanese colony. After attaining independence in 1948, civil war broke out between the North and the South 2 years later. That divide still exists today. This background is mentioned to underscore the fact that South Korea had no advantages that African nations lacked. The difference was the leadership it had. Its leaders over the decades had the vision, confidence, discipline, and tenacity to chart a path to sustained economic development and prosperity. Africa just has to raise its game. I thank you. Listeners, what do you think accounts for Africa's sluggish economic performance? Is it a failure of political leadership? What do you think should be done? Please post your comments below.